I've been a medical equipment delivery driver for over a decade. Every day, I cover long distances between towns and remote communities across the heartland of the United States. I've broken down in the middle of nowhere, slept in my van through lightning storms, and taken roads so forgotten they don't show up on GPS. I thought I had seen it all. But what happened to me one night on a highway that runs between Cotton Hill and Briar Ridge still haunts my sleep. Sometimes when I wake up at exactly 3:33 in the morning without any reason, I get the feeling that night never truly ended. This wasn't just a scare. I lived it. I felt it in my bones. It wasn't a ghost story meant to frighten someone around a campfire. It was real. And what's more disturbing is that everything started with a warning that I foolishly ignored. That day, I'd left early from Fairview, hauling some specialized machines for a rural clinic. It was a long trip, but nothing unusual for me. Most of the drive was easygoing, except for the last stretch along a desolate state highway. I didn't think much of it. It was close to 11 at night when I noticed the fuel gauge was dangerously low. I turned on the GPS and saw that the nearest gas station was about 30 minutes away, off a side road heading toward Briar Ridge. I decided to stop at a tiny roadside diner to ask for directions. The place was nearly empty, just a couple of truckers sipping coffee in the corner. I sat down, ordered a cup, and when I asked the waiter about the gas station, his expression turned serious. "You heading to the one in Briar Ridge?" he asked. "Yeah, that's what the GPS shows." "Then listen to me carefully. Fill up and leave. Don't talk to anyone. Don't answer if someone speaks to you." I laughed, thinking he was just trying to scare me. But he didn't crack a smile. "This ain't a joke, son. Someone warned me once too. I barely made it out." I didn't push the conversation. I paid and left, but the way he looked at me stuck in my mind. Now I realize that some warnings come like gifts, and breaking them can come at a cost. But before I go any further, let me invite you to something. If you're someone who enjoys stories like this, subscribe, turn on the bell, and tell me in the comments what's the most terrifying thing that's ever happened to you. Because what you're about to hear isn't fiction. And the scariest part is that it could happen to you too. After leaving the diner, I sat in my van for a while with the engine off, just listening to the quiet. The waiter's warning felt excessive, but something in the way he said it wasn't your typical ghost story to scare outsiders. It was more than that. Like he was remembering something painful. Still, it was late, and I needed gas. So, I took the exit toward Briar Ridge. The road narrowed quickly. No signs, no lights, just thick woods on both sides. My GPS still worked, though it lagged a little. After about 20 minutes without passing another vehicle, I saw a faint glow in the distance. Fluorescent lights flickering on and off, like they couldn't decide whether to stay lit. It was the gas station. Briar Ridge fuel stop. There were no signs, no logos, just a rusted canopy over two ancient pumps and a tiny booth with fogged-up windows. It was technically open, but the place felt frozen in time. I pulled in slowly and parked near the first pump. I turned off the engine. The silence was so deep I could hear the electrical hum of the lights. I stepped out cautiously, scanning the surroundings. No one in sight. As I approached the booth, a man appeared almost out of nowhere. Thin, older, in a stained uniform, and a cap pulled low over his eyes. He didn't say a word, just nodded and began pumping the gas. Everything he did was slow, as if moving took real effort. Meanwhile, the stillness was getting to me. No crickets, no breeze, not even the distant sound of a car. It felt like the world had hit pause. I glanced toward the small convenience store behind the pumps. It was closed, windows covered in brown paper, no machines running. It was odd, but I just wanted to fill up and leave. I was about to pay when I heard a voice. "Where you coming from?" I turned around. Standing behind me was a man who hadn't been there a second earlier. Denim shirt, worn-out boots, messy beard. His tone was polite, but his eyes, There was something off, I replied without thinking, out of habit. Came from Fairview, I said, heading through to Timberline. The moment I spoke, the air shifted. The attendant stopped pumping before the tank was full. He stared at me, then turned and walked slowly back to the booth without a word. I didn't understand. The other man kept staring, unblinking. A knot formed in my stomach, not from what I saw, but from what I began to realize. I had broken the warning, and the worst part, I hadn't even meant to. I stood there beside the van, hose still hanging from the tank. The man didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me like he was waiting for something. I wanted to say more, but deep down, something told me to keep quiet. It wasn't fear yet, more like a heavy discomfort, like when you walk into a place and instantly feel you don't belong. I stayed silent, avoided eye contact, and walked slowly back to the driver's seat. I checked the fuel gauge. It wasn't full, but it was enough. When I closed the door, I glanced at the mirror, and he was gone. I hadn't heard him leave. I hadn't seen him walk off. He just vanished. I turned the key. The engine started without hesitation. I backed up, but as I turned to exit the lot, something made me freeze. By the closed store near the wall stood a woman. She wasn't moving, not looking, just there, perfectly still, wearing a long coat, her hair tied back, head tilted slightly to one side, like she'd been standing there the whole time, waiting in silence. No one had mentioned anyone else being there. No one had walked near her. And the strangest part, inside the cab, the temperature suddenly dropped as if the AC had kicked on by itself. I didn't wait. I drove off. Back on the highway for a moment, I felt relief. The speedometer was working. The GPS updated. The scenery flowed as expected, but I couldn't stop checking the mirrors. I was expecting something, or someone. It didn't take long before I noticed something wrong. The same curve I'd already passed showed up again. The same fallen branch on the roadside. The same leaning pole. Like I was going in circles, even though I hadn't turned the wheel. I checked the GPS. It was frozen in the same spot. Not a foot forward, not a foot back. I took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I got turned around. I pressed the gas a little harder and focused on driving straight. Then I saw it. Up ahead, a familiar shape. Flickering lights, rusted frame, same booth. It was the gas station. Again. I slammed the brakes, rubbed my eyes. This couldn't be real. I hadn't turned around. I hadn't backtracked. So how had I ended up in the exact same place? And that's when I knew. It didn't matter where I drove. It didn't matter if I stayed silent now. The warning had already been broken, and once something like that is shattered, whatever comes next is no longer up to you. I turned off the engine, both hands on the wheel. I didn't move a muscle. The station in front of me was identical in every way. The flickering lights in that strange rhythm, the foggy windows of the booth, those worn-out pumps. Everything the same. As if no time had passed. As if I had never left. Inside, I felt something was wrong. But I couldn't explain it. It wasn't fear. Not yet. It was something colder, something like being trapped in a moment you can't escape and can't control, like logic had stopped applying. I looked out the window. No one. Cautiously, I stepped out of the van, walked slowly toward the pumps. No sounds at all. Not even the hum of the flickering lights that had annoyed me before. Now there was only silence, the kind that builds pressure in your ears. It felt like if I said one word, something would break. I approached the booth. Empty. I tapped the glass. Nothing. I turned toward the store, and there she was again. The woman. Standing in the same spot. Not moving. Not speaking. But this time, she was looking at me. I wanted to run back to the van, but something behind me caught my attention. I spun around fast. Nothing, or so I thought. The reflection in the booth's window showed a shadow. Not a clear figure. Just a shift in light, like someone standing inches behind me. I turned again. Still nothing. I stepped back, trying to breathe normally. but the feeling of being watched grew stronger by the second. I hurried back to the van, locked the doors, and then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. On the passenger seat, a folded piece of paper. It hadn't been there earlier. With trembling hands, I picked it up. A gas receipt. Old, wrinkled. The same station's logo. The date. August 3rd, 1994. My full name. Handwritten. I dropped the paper like it burned my fingers. How was that possible? How did it get there? None of it made sense. I just knew I had to get out of there. I turned the key. Nothing. Tried again. Still nothing. And then I looked up and saw the man in the denim shirt. He was standing in front of the van, alone, smiling. I saw him just beyond the hood. His smile wasn't wide or friendly. It was subtle, barely there, like he was enjoying something I couldn't yet understand. My fingers shook as I gripped the key and turned it again, harder, like fear alone could spark the engine. And it worked. The roar of the engine hit me like a punch to the chest. I threw it in reverse, jerked the wheel, and sped out of there, tires screeching on the old pavement. I didn't look in the mirrors. I didn't want to see if he was following. I didn't want to know if the woman was still standing by the store. I just needed to get away. I took the same road back, convinced now that something was very wrong. What I didn't know was that the worst part hadn't even started yet. At first, everything seemed normal. The straight road, the trees lining the shoulder, the GPS signal moving again. But a few minutes later, I hit the brakes, the same curve, the same dry branch by the edge of the road, the same leaning utility pole. I passed it, refusing to stop. Maybe it was just a similar turn. I didn't want to accept what my mind was already starting to suspect. 10 minutes later, it happened again. The curve, the branch, the pole. My throat tightened. The GPS froze, again locked in place, not moving forward, not moving back. The signal dropped. And worst of all, the clock on the dashboard hadn't changed since I'd left the gas station the second time. The hands hadn't moved a single minute. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I pushed harder on the gas. The engine growled. But the scenery didn't change, like time had folded itself around me and trapped me in a closed loop with no exit. I started sweating. Not from heat, but from the panic. The feeling of being trapped, even in open space, was suffocating. Every mile looked exactly like the last. There was no more doubt. I was stuck, and as if that wasn't enough, in the distance, the lights again, the same ones. From the gas station, I forced myself to stop. My body shook. I sat in silence, heart pounding like it was trying to break out of my chest. I had come back, or maybe I had never left. That was the moment I finally understood. It didn't matter what I did now. This wasn't about the road or the GPS. It was deeper. It started the moment I answered that question. Where are you coming from? And now, no matter where I went, it had already caught up with me. I don't know why I did it, but I got out of the van. Something inside screamed not to go back there, but my legs moved anyway. Like whatever was waiting ahead was calling me, not with words, but with a pull I could feel in my gut. The gas station looked the same. Everything the same. But the silence, it was heavier than ever. The pumps were dead. No lights in the booth. The windows so fogged they looked iced over from inside. The store was still closed. No sign of the man, no trace of the woman. But at the far end of the lot, a door stood slightly ajar. The bathroom, a faint white glow came from inside, like a forgotten flashlight. I walked toward it, each step slower than the last. The floor creaked underfoot and my ears buzzed. I went in. The smell hit first, dampness, rust, and something else I couldn't place. The walls were stained, the sink dripped, the mirror above it cracked in one corner. I stepped forward, breath tight, and looked at my reflection, but it didn't look back. It was there, but still, frozen, as if refusing to follow my movements, as if it was waiting for me to do something first. I couldn't breathe. I stepped back, spun around to see if someone was behind me. Nothing. I looked back at the mirror, and now, another figure behind me. Faint, dark, blurred like a smudge, but undeniably there. Too close. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. I rushed to the door, but it wouldn't budge. I threw my shoulder into it, kicked, pounded, screamed. No response, not even an echo. Then I heard breathing, slow, very close, like it came from inside the room. I turned, but all I saw was that same empty bathroom. I stood there frozen for what felt like hours, until, suddenly, the door opened on its own. I didn't question it, I just ran out into the night, gasping. The air outside felt different, heavier, colder. The van sat exactly where I'd left it, the dashboard lights still on. I climbed in, started the engine without thinking, and drove. I didn't look back. I can't explain it, I just knew I couldn't stay another minute, because that place wasn't part of any road. It was a dead point, one that appears on no map, but finds you the moment you break the wrong rules. I don't remember exactly how I got out of that place. All I know is that when I became aware again, I was already back on the highway, engine running, hands clenched around the steering wheel. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't look at the GPS. I didn't do anything that could pull me out of the trance I'd fallen into. I just wanted to get away, as far as I could. And for a while, I thought I had. That night, I made it to Timberline, nerves shredded. I checked into a small motel and tried to sleep, but I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that mirror again. That reflection that didn't follow me. That shadow. The next morning, with sunlight pouring through the curtains, everything felt more normal. Almost like what I had experienced had been nothing more than a hallucination born of exhaustion. That's what I told myself. What I wanted to believe. I completed my deliveries, returned home 2 days later, and tried to resume life as usual. But then things started happening, things I couldn't explain. One morning, heading out for work, I noticed a folded slip of paper tucked under my van's windshield wiper. I assumed it was a flyer, but when I opened it, it was that same old receipt I'd seen in the van at the gas station, the exact one, same date, August 3rd, 1994. My full name, handwritten in faded blue ink. I threw it away, but the next night I found it on my dining room table. No one else had access to my home. I got rid of it again, tore it up, flushed the pieces down the drain. Days later it turned up inside the glove box. I didn't know what to think. I hadn't told anyone, not my co-workers, not my family. I kept it all to myself, but every time I saw that paper, I felt it. Something was watching me, as if that place hadn't just let me leave, but had marked me, because it wasn't just the receipt. One morning, getting into the van, I noticed small footprints on the passenger side mat, barefoot, wet, like a child had been there. That's when I realized distance meant nothing. It didn't matter how many miles separated me from that station. Something from there had come back with me. I started losing track of time, waking up in the middle of the night with no reason, heart pounding, mouth dry. At first I thought it was stress, anxiety, residual trauma from what I'd lived through at that cursed gas station. But then I noticed the pattern, always the same time, 3:33 a.m., without fail. Every night my eyes would snap open, and the worst part wasn't the insomnia. It was the certainty, the physical, almost tangible sensation that something was in the room with me. I couldn't see it, I couldn't hear it, but I knew it was there. Sometimes in a corner, sometimes at the foot of the bed, like a shadow that vanishes the moment you look for it. One night, fed up with the fear, I forced myself to get up. I walked through the apartment in total silence. Nothing moved, but as I passed the hallway mirror, I froze. I saw something. For a second, I thought it was just me, but it wasn't. There was a delay, a tiny, almost imperceptible lag between my movement and the reflection. It lasted only an instant, but it was enough to send a chill crawling across my skin. I went back to bed, didn't sleep again. Another night, as I was making coffee at 3:30 a.m., I heard the sound of a gas pump clicking on outside the window. I live on the second floor, in a quiet neighborhood, no gas stations nearby, no reason to hear that sound. But I heard it, a sharp click, the exact sound those old pumps make when activated. Not once, twice, then 3 times, then silence. I peeked through the blinds, no one in the street, not a single car, not even a shadow. But I know what I heard. It wasn't in my head. It wasn't a dream. And that's when I understood I had crossed a line. I wasn't in the station anymore. The station was in me. Since that night, every time I wake up at 3:33, I don't touch the curtains. I don't move. I just stay in bed, breathing slow, waiting for it to pass. Because even if I can't see it, I know something is watching me, closer than I'm willing to admit. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I swear I hear a voice. Just one word, my name. After weeks without proper sleep, I did something most would call extreme. I moved, packed everything in one afternoon without telling anyone. I found an apartment on the outskirts of Crestfield, a quiet place. No high-rises, no gas stations nearby. I specifically searched for a place without an elevator, without large mirrors, without anything that could remind me of what I'd experienced. The first few days were calm. I didn't wake up at 3:33. I didn't find strange papers. I didn't hear impossible sounds. I started to believe I was free, that maybe it had all been a product of exhaustion, a waking nightmare crafted by a burned-out mind. Until something happened. Something that showed me it wasn't about the place. One night, walking through a shopping plaza to grab some groceries, I passed the underground parking elevators. The doors opened on their own as I walked by. No one inside. But for a brief instant, just a blink, I saw a figure, back turned, motionless, standing in the middle of the elevator. I didn't stop. I didn't turn. I kept walking, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. But I knew. I had seen it. Again. Later that same week, something worse happened. At 3 in the morning, I heard the front door of the building open. I live in a secure complex, no doorman. No one should have been coming in. I got up, cautiously descended the stairs and saw something that froze my blood. The utility room door, the one always locked with a padlock, was ajar. I turned on my phone's flashlight and looked inside. No one, just a single piece of paper on the floor, wrinkled, stained, the same slip, the same handwriting, the same fading blue ink, J.N. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I went back to my apartment and finally accepted the truth I had tried so hard to avoid. It wasn't the station. It wasn't the road. It wasn't even the man who spoke to me. It was me. I answered. I opened the door with that one word. I let something in. And from that moment on, it doesn't matter where I go. It doesn't matter how far I move. Because now I know the truth. He isn't out there. He's here. Since that night, I stopped trying to explain it. I haven't told a soul. Not my sister who keeps calling, worried about my moods. Not my co-workers who've noticed I don't join them for lunch anymore. Not even the therapist I visited once, but walked out on when she asked me to describe everything in detail. Because how do you explain that a forgotten gas station on an empty highway can follow you? How do you make someone understand that once you speak, you can't unspeak it? I started living like a fugitive in my own home, covered all the mirrors, avoided reflections, slept with a soft lamp on and the TV muted just to drown out the silence. But sometimes even that wasn't enough, because he was still there, not always visible, but always present. In the mornings, I'd find tiny footprints near the front door. Sometimes ash scattered on the doormat, or a shadow flickering just at the edge of vision while brushing my teeth. And worst of all, waking up at 3:33, not because of an alarm, but because of that pressure in my chest, that hollow feeling that tells you you're not alone. One early morning, I dared to step out into the hallway. I hadn't done that in weeks. I opened the door, no one. But at the far end, beneath the flickering light, there was a mark on the wall, a handprint, small, made of something like soot. I approached slowly. The air turned colder. The bulb flickered harder, like it was on the verge of burning out. And when I got close enough, I saw next to the mark, someone had written a word, 3 letters, J-N. It was my mark, my tag, my sentence. Since then, I've understood. Even though I return to my apartment, even though I keep working, even though I walk in the sunlight like anyone else, a part of me is still down there, in that hallway with no number, in that station with no name, and I don't know how much longer I can pretend I don't feel it. 2 weeks ago, I had to visit a hospital in Redwood on assignment. While walking down the corridor, without thinking, I pressed the elevator button. The doors opened, and there they were. A pair of small, worn-out sneakers, laces undone, right in the middle of the cabin. I didn't look up. I couldn't. I stepped back. The doors closed. Since that day, I don't use elevators. I climb stairs, even 10 flights. I walk around with headphones on, even inside my apartment, just to block out the silence. But I know it doesn't matter. I'm not escaping, I'm just delaying it. And if one day you find a child alone, silent, standing in an elevator, don't speak, don't look. And above all, never return the gaze, because once you do, he sees you too. And he'll never stop, never.